There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist, by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems will be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself to
She
Twitter.
chained herself.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for tuning in to episode 114 of Loomer Unleashed. I'm your host, Laura Loomer. We are live right now on Rumble and X, so please be sure that you head on over to rumble.com/Laura Loomer and you repost the live link. Click the follow button so that you're following me on Rumble so that you never miss an episode. And if you click the notifications and you enable notifications on your phone, then you will be notified every single time I go live and you will never miss an episode. We're also live on X right now, so please be sure, before my guest joins me, that you repost and retweet the live link. We have a very, very interesting episode planned tonight here at Loomer Unleashed. We're going to be speaking with Justin Goodman, who's the Senior VP of an organization called White Coat Waste. And if you've been following the news this week, then you may have seen a story about how President Trump's FDA is significantly cutting back on animal testing, which is incredible. You know that I'm an animal lover myself. I love dogs. I'm very much into animal rescue. And President Trump has really led the charge on this. This is something that he did during his first administration as well, passing executive orders addressing animal cruelty. And now in the second Trump administration, President Trump and his administration officials through the FDA and also the EPA have announced that they are significantly cutting back on animal testing to help protect innocent animals who are subjected to taxpayer-funded animal experiments. You see that even PETA, the leftist organization PETA, which has often sided with the Democrat Party, is praising President Trump. It's like hell is frozen over. PETA, animal rights groups, praised Trump administration for phasing out cruel tests on dogs and other animals. Trump's FDA and EPA are phasing out animal testing. You can scroll down. We can read this article. It's interesting, isn't it? How, scroll back up. You may just have to refresh that page. Isn't it interesting how the Democrat Party likes to bill itself as the party that focuses on the environment and animal rights, and yet it's Republicans. It's literally the Trump administration that is phasing out these cruel tests on animals. You could probably find other articles about it too. Here we go. PETA animal rights groups praise the Trump administration. That Fox article is not loading for some reason. You can click read more. That's strange. Well, either way, we can go to the actual FDA announcement there. It's the same thing. FDA announces plan to phase out animal testing requirement for monoclonal antibodies and other drugs. This was a couple days ago, but, you know, got kind of lost amid all of the news with the tariffs and cracking down on China and Passover. And, you know, we're coming up on Easter. So a lot of stories have obviously distracted from this, but I don't think that it received enough attention, which is why I wanted to focus the entire episode on this subject tonight, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of the fact that there is still a lot of animal testing happening in our country, and it's being funded by groups like the NIH, which we know was overseen by Anthony Fauci. And you know, just because President Trump is back in the White House and he's cracking down on animal testing doesn't mean that there still aren't Biden holdovers and individuals who funded a lot of animal testing during the Biden regime who are still there trying to fund animal testing. And so here it says the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is taking a groundbreaking step to advance public health by replacing animal testing in the development of monoclonal antibody therapies and other drugs with more effective human relevant methods. The new approach is designed designed to improve drug safety and accelerate the evaluation process while reducing animal experimentation, lowering research and development costs, and ultimately drug prices. The FDA's animal testing requirement will be reduced, refined, and potentially replaced using a range of approaches, including AI-based computational models of toxicity in cell lines and organoid toxicity testing in a laboratory setting. If you saw my website today, loomer.com, and be sure that you bookmark my website, loomer.com, so that you're reading all of our breaking exclusive updates and reports. We broke this story today. Exclusive: NIH paying billionaire Moderna co-founder to torture beagles for weight loss drug. And of course, this is an investigation done by White Coat Waste. And so I wanted to have the senior VP of White Coat Waste on tonight to go through this story. So he's going to be joining us momentarily. But before he joins, I want to go through this article with you so that you can see what is still ongoing, even under the Trump administration. And hopefully President Trump identifies a lot of these Biden holdovers and individuals at NIH, and he clears them out. So you can scroll down. Working with the new Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency, White Coat Waste is already scoring major wins by exposing millions of dollars of taxpayer money used in cruel and wasteful animal testing in the United States and abroad. One of White Coat Waste's top priorities for Trump and Doge is slashing funding for laboratories worldwide that carry out cruel and unethical testing on cats and dogs. Recently, White Coat Waste has exposed federal contracts funded by the National Institute of Health, NIH, and the Department of Defense, paying to torture 300 beagles per week in Chinese labs. It's terrible, absolutely horrific. I mean, we know that China abuses animals. They eat dogs in China. You know, my dog Mecca, my little Yorkie poo that you have seen on the show before. She's one of my 4 dogs that I have. She was actually rescued from a Chinese meat market. And so they do not treat animals very well in China. And, my next guest, who has now connected, Justin Goodman, the senior vice president of White Coat Waste, joins me tonight to talk about this latest investigation, an expose uncovered by White Coat Waste, and how our taxpayer dollars are still, to this day, under the Trump administration, going towards funding cruel and abusive animal testing experiments in labs here in the United States and labs abroad that are funded by our taxpayer dollars. So joining me now is Justin Goodman, the senior vice president of White Coat Waste. Justin, thank you so much for joining me on Loomer Unleashed tonight. You know that we love animals here, and you and I had a very long conversation earlier today about the important work you're doing. But, you know, it's tax day. It's tax day. So I figured that while Americans are, you know, sitting around having dinner or digesting their dinner, watching my show tonight, maybe crying themselves to sleep over the money that they had to send the federal government today to pay their taxes, they would like to know where some of their taxpayer money is going. All those big checks that people sent today to the IRS. We're going to have a very, very emotional conversation about how some of that money is being used to fund these cruel experiments. So thanks for joining me tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for all your advocacy for animals. We really appreciate it.
Of course. So I just want to get into it. We put the story up on my website, loomer.com today. We just showed the article. Let's get it back on the screen about how White Coat Waste uncovered through their investigation. You sent a FOIA request and you got documents that show that the co-founder of Moderna actually received a ton of taxpayer money. You can scroll down and see the details of this article just so that people can see the receipts right here. Through the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, White Coat Waste has uncovered how in 2024, the NIH, and it's 2024, but they're still conducting these experiments today, forked over $322,000 of our taxpayer money to a biotech company co-founded and run by Robert Langer, who is the billionaire co-founder of Moderna. And now he has his own biolab called Langer's Synthesis Bio, and they're receiving our taxpayer dollars to conduct these horrific experiments on dogs and pigs. What can you tell us about this, Justin?
So yeah, as you said, today's tax day, and I think most taxpayers would be shocked to learn that the federal government is the single largest funder of animal testing in the world. And over $20 billion of the money that hardworking Americans just sent to Uncle Sam is going to be wasted to torture dogs, cats, primates, and other animals in laboratories, both in the United States and abroad in places like China. And our recent investigation that you broke today, and thank you so much for doing that, shows that these tax dollars are being sent to billionaires. The billionaire co-founder of Moderna, who is an mRNA pioneer, who is a startup. He has tons of startup companies. I think he started over 20 companies. He doesn't need our tax money, but Uncle Sam, the NIH in particular, sent him over $300,000 last year to fund R&D for a new Ozempic-like competitor drug that mimics the effects of a gastric bypass surgery. And the way they're doing this testing is that they're force feeding this experimental drugs to dogs for 8 months at a time to see what happens. Now, not only is this testing completely unnecessary, obviously Robert Langer, billionaire co-founder of Moderna, does not need taxpayer dollars. And that's the same for a lot of these colleges and universities, places like Harvard, places like Yale, places like University of California that have multi-billion dollar, tens of billion dollar endowments in some cases. We're footing the bill for this wasteful and cruel research that's being conducted there.
And just so people know, speaking of endowments, he currently is teaching at MIT. So if you want to express your outrage, it's really interesting. Again, we talked about in the beginning opening of the show tonight how the Democrats traditionally have been described as the party that cares about the environment and animal welfare. And, you know, for years we were brainwashed into thinking that it's the Democrats that care about these causes. But during the first Trump administration, President Trump is the one who signed an executive order making it a felony to abuse animals. He actually was the first Republican president to crack down on animal cruelty from the executive branch. We've never had a president who has taken animal welfare into his own hands via executive order before, but President Trump did. I'm sure that we can pull the receipts on that and show everybody on the screen here, because we're all about the receipts here at Loomer Unleashed. But not only that, you know, you have all these liberal institutions like MIT and Harvard and all of these elite research institutions where they pride themselves on being very liberal, and yet they're the ones that are funding and participating and hiring individuals like Bob Langer of Moderna to conduct these horrific experiments.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, you know, speaking of Harvard, two of the animal testing grants that Trump has cut already in this first few weeks or first few months of the administration were transgender animal experiments that we exposed that were being conducted at Harvard University with millions of our tax dollars. Obviously, Trump is now cracking down on all funding to Harvard, which is great because there's tens of thousands of animals locked in Harvard's taxpayer-funded animal laboratories, and taxpayers shouldn't be forced to foot the bill for that, especially at an institution like Harvard that has billions of dollars in its stockpile waiting to be spent. And we're seeing this across the country. Colleges and universities are public enemy number one when it comes to taxpayer-funded animal testing. And they're the ones on Capitol Hill lobbying against these reforms that the Trump administration is calling for to cut funding for animal testing, because animal testing to colleges and universities, professors around the country is a big business. $20 billion is a lot of money. People are making their careers torturing animals in laboratories at taxpayers' expense. And the only people benefiting from it are the people being paid to do it. These experiments are not improving public health. The NIH budget doubled 25 years ago. Our life expectancy isn't better. Public health isn't better. We're not living better lives, but people are getting rich.
Absolutely. And a lot of people may not know your organization, White Coat Waste, but they certainly know of the work that you've done. And so, as you were saying, if you saw President Trump recently talk about during his address to Congress how Doge uncovered all of this wasteful spending to do experiments on transgender mice, that is work that you guys are responsible for uncovering. Also, the stories that really captivated everybody's attention during COVID, when you exposed, your organization exposed Dr. Fauci's horrific experiments on beagles. Remember, we have some articles about that. Let's go ahead and get that image up on the screen here from when you guys exposed those horrific. I think we have a video actually from when you were uncovering all of the horrific animal testing experiments that were being conducted by Dr. Fauci. And Dr. Fauci, of course, was abusing these poor beagles who were put in these cages. You can describe some of the acts of animal abuse in greater detail than I can, but I recall one of them where they put their head in some kind of a cone and they were just letting fruit flies like literally eat their eyes, and they were sitting there unable to move, and they were just being eaten alive by fruit flies. And this is something that our taxpayer dollars are paying for. And I remember seeing it on TV and I had to just turn it off because it's just so disgusting. The idea of watching a poor innocent dog being chained inside a laboratory, having its face literally eaten alive by bugs as some kind of experiment paid for by my money. So let's go ahead and play the video.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, speaking fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that
So how much of our taxpayer money went towards funding those horrific experiments by the CCP in China that we just saw on the screen right there?
Yeah, Laura, it's a coincidence we're talking about it this week because 5 years ago, this week is when White Coat Waste first uncovered Fauci's funding for the Wuhan lab that obviously everyone now understands probably caused COVID with its gain of function experiments that Fauci was shipping tax dollars to. Also, USAID was paying for those animal experiments. We got the receipts for that, exposed it in early 2020. And a couple of days later, of course, President Trump went on TV and cut the grants. But despite what happened in Wuhan, the NIH has continued to ship tax dollars to dozens of animal testing laboratories in China. Those were just a few videos of footage from inside taxpayer-funded labs in China, including laboratories that are run by the CCP and are working with the People's Liberation Army. The Trump administration has cut funding for a few of those laboratories over the last few months, and we're very grateful for that. He's cut funding for some Fauci-funded experiments on rabbits that were happening, malaria infection experiments that were happening in one of these laboratories. But today, as of this morning, 20 animal laboratories in China are still eligible for funding from the National Institutes of Health. And one of those laboratories has an active grant from the NIH and the DoD to test experimental drugs on 300 beagles every single week at U.S. taxpayers' expense. And the reason they pick beagles, and it says this right in the FOIA documents under the justification for the species, this Chinese lab told the NIH that the reason it was choosing beagles is because they're cute and docile and easy to domesticate. So for the same exact reasons that beagles make great pets.
And because they don't fight back. You told me on the phone today because they said that the beagles are not aggressive and they can get away with abusing them, they said, because they're less likely to bite, which is just, absolutely horrific. I mean, imagine putting this in a grant application and saying that you want to abuse beagles and you know that beagles are a docile breed and that's why you're choosing beagles. And then the United States government through the NIH is sending money over so that you can torture an innocent dog that is not going to fight back.
Yeah, the NIH apparently thought it was a great reason to torture beagles and sent them hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it on an active contract that's still being funded, unfortunately, under the Trump administration. But we are cautiously optimistic. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the new recently confirmed NIH director, is a supporter of White Coat Waste and has been an advocate against some of Dr. Fauci's mad science experiments on dogs, on other animals, both in the U.S. and abroad. So we're hoping they crack down quickly. But yeah,
you talked to him about this? I mean, you said that he's an ally of yours. What does he say when you tell him that the NIH is still funding these grants? I mean, can't they just pull the funding? Why not pull the funding immediately?
I think that's a great question. I spoke to him before he was confirmed. I appeared on his X Spaces that he was hosting, talking about Fauci's funding, NIH funding for dog labs in China. And he's receptive. I expect him to do good things. He's a reformer. He wants to clean up the mess that Fauci and others left with the NIH. This needs to be done
like right now. This needs to be done right now. This is something that Trump needs to see right now, especially amid, all the tariffs with China and China, attacking our country and making threats and spewing their CCP propaganda. This is something that could literally be stopped tomorrow with the stroke of President Trump's pen. So if you're watching this right now and you don't want your money going towards funding 300 beagles every single week being tortured by the CCP, and they're animals over there. I mean, they behave like animals towards animals in China. And I don't really care if that offends people because I know what it's like. My dog was rescued from a Chinese meat market. My little dog, who was emaciated when I got her, was only in the United States for 2 weeks when I first adopted her during COVID, and she was going to be eaten alive. So, how are you going to eat a dog that's 7 pounds? And that's what they do to these dogs. They do experiments on them, and then they kill them, and they sell them in their wet markets, and they eat them as snacks. And so this is a barbaric culture, and look, we need to crack down on this because just like the CCP has egregious human rights violations and they promote censorship and communism, they're also encouraging the abuse of animals. And so if you're watching this right now, you need to have outrage and demand that the Trump administration immediately rescind the funding for these grants. There's no time to waste, in my opinion, talking to the new NIH director saying, oh, you're a fan. That's great. We hope to do good things. If you want to do good things, then do it. That's all you can do. You can immediately rescind the funding, in my opinion. I think that there's too much dancing and too much talking in Washington. And, perhaps somebody needs to go back to Washington, D.C. and go back to the Oval Office and tell President Trump about this, right? So we can get some quick action like that.
From your mouth to Trump's ears, and we can bring some beagles along for that adventure to the Oval. Making these changes, these common sense reforms to stop the torture of pets in China is something everyone can support, and actually picks up where Trump left off in 2020 and 21. He cut the Wuhan lab grant. He actually also cut under Trump. This is actually what led us to the Wuhan lab investigation that we did, is under the first Trump administration and for years before it, the USDA this is a crazy story and it's 100% true. We got the receipts. The USDA was having staff fly to China, to the wet markets, to other countries, to their wet markets, buy dog and cat meat, fly it back to the United States, and then force feed it to kittens in cannibalism experiments at the USDA laboratory in the Beltway, right outside of Washington, D.C. This went on for decades. It cost $22 million to taxpayers. They killed over 5,000 cats in this laboratory, thousands of dogs. And this had gone on for years until we exposed it. And the Trump USDA in 2018 said no mas. They cut off the funding for the project, and they actually adopted out the cats who were left in the laboratory. And one of them now lives with our president and founder, Anthony Bellotti. So again, this is all part of Trump's legacy that he left, that he began in 2020, 2021, and we're happy he's picking up where he left off in terms of cutting some of these Chinese grants, cracking down on animal testing, other federal agencies like we've seen this week, cutting off transgender grants. But there's a lot more work to do. There's more money being wasted on animal experimentation than ever, more taxpayer money. There's more animals in labs than ever. And we know more than ever that it's just a complete waste of tax dollars. We're not getting public health benefits. There's not a good return on investment. The people benefiting are the ones who are cashing checks to torture puppies, and it's got to stop. And this is something that's widely supported across the political spectrum. Over 70% of Americans want to stop funding labs in China. They want to stop funding testing on dogs and cats. They don't want the tax payment that they made maybe today, maybe last night, to be sent to China to torture puppies. I mean, this is just common sense.
Is being sent to China through these grants from U.S. taxpayers via the NIH to fund these experiments on beagles, because I think people would like to know how much money is going towards these grants specifically, especially given the fact that the United States is engaged in a tariff war with China as we speak, right? Currently live on this program tonight. So How much money are we talking about? You said that $20 billion this year alone of U.S. taxpayer dollars is going to go towards the animal testing industry as a whole. How much is going to China for these NIH experiments that the Trump administration is aware of, but for some reason, the new NIH director doesn't want to immediately rescind, even though he says he's a fan of yours?
I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars, and actually it's hard to get an exact dollar amount because transparency about federal spending is so horrendous. But Joni Ernst did a report a few years ago and tracked about $1 billion that had been sent to entities in China, including these laboratories. She actually just introduced a bill today with GOP conference chair in the House, Lisa McClain, called the AFAR Act that we're supporting that would completely cut funding for all laboratories, animal laboratories in China, Russia, and other adversarial nations. I think we can all agree that our tax dollars shouldn't be spent being shipped to animal laboratories that are torturing puppies in foreign enemies.
This is incredible. I
countries.
can't believe that this is still happening under the Trump administration.
Yeah, well, and listen, there's a big mess to clean up at the NIH. Francis Collins, Anthony Fauci, Monica Bertagnoli, the leadership of the NIH allowed rampant waste, fraud, and abuse to blossom at this agency for decades. Look at the photos you were describing in the beginning of the program with the money Fauci sent to Tunisia to put beagle puppies, sedate them, lock them in mesh cages, and then fill cages with sandflies and let them eat their faces alive. Take photographs of it.
Yeah, we have those photos somewhere. We can look them up. Perhaps my producer can find these photos. But I'm not making it up, you guys. These are literally the types of experiments that our taxpayer dollars are funding. They're putting flies in a container with beagles and letting them eat their faces alive. It's disgusting. I think we have. They're letting them blind them. They just want their eyes to just be completely eaten.
That photo.
Perhaps
that
we can
photo
find
with
them.
the green gloves right there was taken in
That's
Fauci's laboratory. That's one of them that was taken in Fauci's laboratory in the Beltway, where they were doing biting fly experiments on beagles. Those are photos we got through the Freedom of Information Act. And then they were funding that laboratory in Tunisia where they were locking their heads in mesh cages. And then not only were these papers coming out with photos from the Fauci-funded experimenters citing Fauci as the funder, then Fauci and the NIH went out and lied about it and worked with the Washington Post to design a disinformation campaign where they ran a front page story saying that it was fake news. And it turns out we have the receipts. Not only did they fund that laboratory, they lied about it and coordinated this whole campaign to cover it up. 5 years later, the Washington Post finally admitted it, but Fauci's still lying about it. He lied about it in his book. But that was just the tip of the iceberg for him in the NIH. Fauci also funded laboratories that were debarking the beagles because beagles are small, they are easy to abuse, they are cute, but they're also loud and they make a lot of noise. So Fauci was paying laboratories for an extra line item to debark the beagles so they wouldn't make a peep in the laboratory.
In other words, taking out their vocal cords.
So they couldn't make any noise in the laboratory. They couldn't bark. They couldn't cry out in pain. They just want them these silent victims at taxpayer expense. And this has been going on for decades. And Fauci's not just some paper pusher. I think people think of him, maybe think he's an evil mad scientist, and he is for a lot of reasons, including what happened in Wuhan and funding and lying about that. But this guy for 50 years was personally conducting animal experimentation. In the 80s, he was infecting chimps with HIV, hoping they would get AIDS, promising we'd have an AIDS vaccine. Guess what? We still don't have one. Until the day he left the NIH in 2022, Fauci was personally experimenting on primates, infecting them with SIV, which is the monkey version of HIV and other viruses. So even though he's gone, his legacy of waste, fraud, and abuse absolutely permeated the NIH. And there are people who worked for him and with him and across the agency who need to be cleaned out. There's puppies right now being injected with cocaine and fentanyl in experiments, active contracts that the NIH has. And
where are these puppies being abused?
Laboratories across the country, four higher private testing labs that the NIH is giving contracts to do cocaine abuse experiments on puppies where they inject them with cocaine, overdose them on cocaine, inject them with fentanyl, and then some of the puppies get injected with both of their drugs to see how they interact. And this is all happening at this cocaine experiment was recently renewed.
Do the dogs die? What happens to these dogs?
Some of them die from the overdose and some are killed at the end of the experiment. And this project was actually recently renewed. We worked with Rand Paul a few years ago to expose this project. We weren't able to end it. And the NIH actually renewed it and has now given it over $5 million of tax money to abuse these puppies and these cocaine addiction
So
experiments.
when do they receive the $5 million? Since it's tax day, when do they get the $5 million?
They've gotten that money over the last few years, but they're currently being funded right now. There's over 48,000 dogs in U.S. laboratories right now, and most of those dogs are being used in either taxpayer-funded experiments or government mandated testing by the FDA and the EPA, where they force feed puppies chemical experimental drugs and pesticides and other chemicals to see at what massive dose they start to seize and foam at the mouth, and in some cases die. And the FDA and EPA are forcing companies to do this. And that's why it's exciting that this past week, both the EPA and the FDA picked up where Trump 45 left off and announced that they were renewing the efforts that the Biden administration sidelined to cut some of these animal testing mandates because they're incredibly wasteful, incredibly expensive, and incredibly cruel.
Yeah, just when you thought that you couldn't hate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris enough, you find out that they are funding and encouraging the funding of all of these horrific experiments on innocent animals. It's so sad. I mean, you really just have to be such a screwed up person to willingly know that this is happening and then sideline efforts to combat it. I mean, I think that President Trump would be outraged if he knew that this was still happening under his administration. I know President Trump, and I think that he would immediately want to end this. I can't speak for the president, but I can only imagine that if he found out that grant money under his administration was going towards funding these horrific experiments on animals, that he would want to end it immediately. So how can people contact the new director of the NIH? And where do you think that the activist wing of the MAGA movement or people watching this show tonight can focus their efforts in terms of demanding accountability? Like, who are some of these holdovers at the NIH who should be fired by President Trump? I think you should start naming some names.
Nora Volkow is one person I would name. She's been at the NIH for over 40 years. She's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. She's the one who has greenlit and approved the cocaine and fentanyl addiction experiments on puppies. They were under her. NIDA was funding transgender animal experiments where they were creating transgender lab animals by surgically sterilizing them and then giving them sex hormones and then overdosing them on a GHB, which is a drug used at sex parties, to see if female animals on testosterone were more likely to overdose on this sex party drug than animals not on testosterone. That project got over $1 million under Volkow at NIDA and was recently cut, thank goodness, by the Trump administration. Cocaine experiments on puppies. NIDA is also funding experiments in laboratories across the country where they're giving monkeys methamphetamines. They're forcing pregnant monkeys to eat THC edibles. Tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars being wasted on these type of stupid experiments, all at taxpayer expense, all widely opposed. And again, the Trump administration, they don't get nearly enough credit for it. But I would say that President Trump, his first administration, made more progress to end the abuse of animals in laboratories than any other administration in history. From ending those kitten cannibalism experiments at the USDA, which was the government's single largest cat lab, done, shut down. They shut down nicotine experiments on monkeys at the FDA, obviously defunded the Wuhan lab, ended dog testing at the VA, put in place the first retirement policies for lab animals at federal agencies. So Trump has a great track record when it comes especially to saving dogs and cats from wasteful government experiments. Unfortunately, NIH is public enemy number one. And during his first during the first administration, they were really insulated from a lot of scrutiny. They were protected by members of Congress. Of course, there was lots of deep state folks at the NIH.
We have a new NIH director, and so I don't understand why Dr. How do you pronounce his last name?
Jay Bhattacharya.
Bhattacharya. Why is he just telling you what you want to hear? I mean, he says, oh, he's a big fan of yours. So my question to Dr. Bhattacharya is, if you're such a fan of white coat waste, why are you allowing this? You're the director. Use your power. Shut down these grants and the money and the financing of the animal abuse. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, yeah, you're doing such good work, Justin. But at the end of the day, if you're not, using your power to revoke the funding, what does a nice compliment mean? It doesn't mean shit. It really doesn't mean shit at the end of the day.
Well, we're trying to give him a little space and let him get settled at NIH. Obviously, they fired a lot of people. He just got confirmed
Yeah,
a
but it
couple
doesn't
weeks ago.
take,
He was
it's
the
like
most
this,
recent
it's
confirmation.
literally like a single statement. If you're the director, you could literally just walk into work one day and say, end all funding of animal experiments. I'm the director, I'm your boss, you have to listen to me. It's that simple.
Hey, I hope I wake up to that tomorrow. I hope Jay's watching right now. People can tweet at NIH director. That's the official account for Dr. Bhattacharya. If you want to let him know that you'd love to see him cut funding
I
for
mean,
dog and cat testing
crazy,
immediately.
or does it not seem like it's that simple? Shouldn't it just be that simple for the NIH director to send out a mass email directive, kind of like how they sent out a mass email with Doge telling everybody to remove pronouns from their bios, or else, they were going to get fired because we're not supporting DEI anymore? Can't they issue a memorandum from the director of the NIH demanding that all grant money is rescinded from animal experiments? People just need to start using their power. It's just, I don't know. It just seems like in Washington, D.C., and, you tell me that your organization is remote, but you work out of Washington, D.C., that there's a lot of excuse making, right? If you want to do something, then go do it, right? If you want to actually end animal testing and you want to protect animals, then go do it. It just seems like there's a lot of talk. And so that's your job. If you're the NIH director and Anthony Fauci was in charge of NIH and he was able to facilitate all of this, why is Anthony Fauci allowed to do whatever he wants, but Dr. Bhattacharya can't do what he wants? If he truly wants to save the animals, then I think that actions speak louder than words.
I agree. I think this is something that could be done with the stroke of a pen. There's precedent for other things the current Trump administration did, and certainly the first Trump administration did, regarding animal testing at these other agencies, where they completely cut the funding, closed the labs, and let the animals be retired. I mean, they could certainly model that and put out a statement pretty quickly saying we're going to close. NIH still has one dog laboratory in DC, in the NIH headquarters, where Dr. Bhattacharya's office is, where they are taking puppies. They've been doing this for decades. They take beagle puppies. They buy them, again, because they're cute and docile and easy to abuse. They buy these beagle puppies. They pump bacteria into their lungs to give them pneumonia. And then they slice their arteries to bleed them out, to put them into septic shock. And then they see which of the dogs can survive and which ones will die within 72 hours. And the ones who survive still get killed.
What is the purpose of that? What is the purpose of doing that?
They're trying to study septic shock. They give them experimental transfusions. They do all kinds of horrible manipulations to these dogs who are suffering horribly, intentionally being infected and sickened with these deadly viruses and bacteria.
That's unacceptable that he's allowing this to happen. And it's been 4 months, several months now. Okay, enough settling in. It's time to do your job. How much settling in? And look, I'm not trying to be antagonistic towards Dr. Bhattacharya, but how much time do you really need to settle in? If this is happening in your own office in Washington, D.C., I would be walking into that room and I don't want to go to prison, so I'm not going to say what I would be doing. But let's just say that I would probably be reversing the roles of those animals and those humans in the positions that they were being subjected to, if I knew that was happening in the same office that I was working out of. I mean, that in my opinion is unacceptable for him to be allowing that to take place. It's April 15th. We're almost towards April 20th, right? January, February, March, April. Like, how much time does this guy need to get settled in since the inauguration of President Trump to shut down these barbaric experiments? Again, I'm not trying to be extremely confrontational towards Dr. Bhattacharya, but at what point do you just say, okay, if you want to do something, go do it? It's one thing if this is happening in Tunisia or, it's happening in some village in China, right? But if this is happening in Washington, D.C., in the very office that you check into every single day, I mean, that's unacceptable. The fact that that's happening in our nation's capital.
Yeah, I agree. And the guy doing that also been in NIH, like Nora Volko at the NIDA. She's been there for 40 years, something like that. This guy Stephen Solomon, the guy doing the dog experiments inside the NIH, he's been there for over a quarter century. These are the type of people who need to be sent to the Indian Health Agency or somewhere else, get them out of Washington, get them out of the animal testing business, let them do something else with their time. But we certainly don't need them here anymore. And hopefully Dr. Bhattacharya and Doge are going to see that and send them, give them their walking papers. But listen, we've seen Doge make a lot of great progress. We've seen FDA has prioritized this issue. EPA has prioritized
Have
this
you
issue.
talked to Dr. Bhattacharya about this, though? Have you told him about these individuals who need to be fired?
No, I have not. This is the first time we're talking about some of these people, the
We're going
old
to be
guard at
talking to him,
NIH,
all
who need to be
right.
let go. Yeah. Well,
We're going to be talking
forward
to him.
it.
He's going to be hearing about these individuals because this is unacceptable. The fact that people like this who've facilitated these experiments are still in their positions and they haven't been fired under a new Trump administration. There's a lot of agencies in Washington, D.C. under the new Trump administration, as people are learning, that have a lot of holdovers and people who participated in a lot of evil activities who need to lose their jobs.
Yeah. And, fortunately, they've been firing a lot of them. It's almost hard to keep track of who's at some of these agencies anymore. But we've seen a lot of people, in particular at Fauci's old agency, NIAID, that have been let go over the last few weeks. His successor, the director of NIAID after Fauci was let go the other day. Obviously, we have a new director. So things are moving in the right direction. But we had 4 priorities coming into the first 100 days of this administration. 1, defund dog and cat testing. I think we're just pushing up, maybe April 20th is the 100-day mark, possibly, for this administration. So
yeah, it's in about 5 days. It's going to be 100 days. Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Bhattacharya in the next 5 days can make some magic for us and, save some dogs and cats. Number 2 is defunding labs in China. And I know the Trump administration has sent a directive to NIH saying they don't want to be funding research in countries of concern, but we still have these active grants. So in some cases we've seen incomplete, action with incomplete follow through. So they've prevented new spending, but they're not stopping the existing spending that's already being shipped over to these laboratories in China and other foreign countries. So dog and cat defunding was number 1. Defunding Chinese labs. 3 was putting in place the EPA animal testing phase out again.
Where do the beagles come from? So when we are funding the 300 beagles per week, are we also supplying the beagles? Where do they get the beagles from?
That's a great question. We are supplying them. So the NIH funds breeding operations all around the country. So there's colleges and universities that with NIH funding, tens of millions of dollars every year in some cases from the NIH, they are breeding dogs and cats to have genetic disorders, to be sick, to have bleeding disorders, to be blind, to be crippled. They intentionally breed them to be sick and deformed for some of these experiments. And then in some other cases, they are paying these essentially commercial puppy mills that specifically breed puppies and kittens to be sold into experimentation. And it's all at taxpayers' expense. That's why our mission is to cut taxpayer funding, because I talked about $20 billion being wasted every year. 2/3 of all animal testing in this country is funded by the federal government. If you get the government out of the animal testing business, the issue—
Which means it's funded by us, really, at the end of the day. It's funded by
Exactly.
all the money that all of you just sent to the IRS today. So.
Yeah, and that's what I lose sleep about overnight. When I paid my tax bill late last night, just at the, by the skin of my teeth in time for the deadline, that's what I think about is, this money is going to go into the NIH. This money is going to go to these other agencies that are torturing animals, wasting my money, hurting public health, causing pandemics. That's the worst case scenario for animal testing. That's what happened in Wuhan, as we were doing experiments with bats and humanized mice and created a super virus that got out and killed 20 million people and cost trillions of dollars. And that's something that we knew was going to happen, and Fauci did anyway. And we're doing that now. There's a laboratory, another project that's happening right now that was funded under Fauci that is still active, Laura. So again, if you get to talk to Trump, this is another one to prioritize. EcoHealth Alliance, the Wuhan Labs partner, has a plan with Colorado State University to build a new bat lab and import hundreds of bats from Asia for virus experiments with Nipah, Ebola, COVID, and other viruses, including incurable viruses. And they're going to set up basically what we're calling Wuhan West out in Colorado, where they're doing these crazy gain-of-function virus experiments, again, at taxpayers' expense, but this time on U.S. soil. So we haven't learned our lesson yet, but that's a project that's gotten over $15 million in taxpayer money, most of it, some from the state of Colorado, but most of it from Fauci's division of the NIH.
It's unbelievable that this hasn't been shut down. Where are these breeding operations taking place, and can there be legislation drafted on a federal level? I know that my friend Mag Weinberger, who's a legislator here in the state of Florida, is creating legislation to target dog breeders here in the state of Florida to go after abusive breeding operations here, where you have all types of mills, and it's a very unfortunate situation with the unregulated dog breeding, but. Where are these taxpayer-funded dog breeding operations where they are breeding dogs to have disorders so that they can abuse them? Because it seems like that should be shut down. I mean, isn't that animal cruelty? Isn't that what falls under animal cruelty according to President Trump's executive order from 2019?
Well, certainly a lot of the experiments that happen in laboratories would be criminal cruelty if they happened outside of a lab in someone's garage. And so there is a double standard that's impossible to reconcile. We're paying people to torture pets in ways that would be criminal felonies, land you in jail. If you're not a citizen, get you deported. But instead, we're paying people big paychecks, rewarding them with promotions and grants, published papers, promote awards at conferences, and we've really created this infrastructure and industry of animal testing in the U.S. that a lot of people are benefiting from. One of the big breeding operations at the University of North Carolina, which gets enormous amounts of taxpayer dollars, and at UNC they are breeding Scotty dogs and all different breeds of dogs to have hemophilia and other bleeding disorders. And a lot of these puppies die soon after birth because if they get a little tiny injury or bang themselves, they bleed out because they can't control their bleeding. And UNC then goes and sells those puppies, experiments on some of them there, or it sells them to other laboratories across the country. And there's lots of little it's become a taxpayer-funded cottage industry of puppy and kitten mills that are specifically breeding these sick and deformed animals who are just destined to be killed in experiments if they don't die before that. I can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear all of a sudden.
Oh, there we go. There, you're back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see? Did you hear what I said about the Make America's Dogs Safe Again legislation? So it's aiming for accountability and transparency. This is a bill right now that's up for review in the Florida legislature. My friend Meg Weinberger, who does a lot of work to support animals, she has her own animal rescue here in the state of Florida. Why can't we get some kind of legislation like this on a federal level to make sure that these breeders, whether they're taxpayer funded or not, have to have standards that provide accountability and transparency for how dogs are being bred so that animals are not abused? I just rescued a dog. I just rescued a puppy a couple weeks ago, a little poodle shih tzu mix from an abusive breeder situation. So you have all these breeders here in Florida that just do backyard breeding, and they have all these dogs that have issues, or they abuse them, or they can't take care of them, and then animal control comes in and they confiscate the dogs. But in this case, you have breeders that are intentionally trying to breed dogs with disabilities and ailments, and then you're subjecting a dog to either be euthanized or have severe health problems or physical disorders for the rest of its life.
Yeah, so we're working on a variety of pieces of legislation that would simply cut the funding for these programs and put them out of business, right? So Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis from Staten Island, who is the co-chair of the House Animal Protection Caucus, introduced a bill called the Help Pets Act that would cut any taxpayer funding to any college and university that is conducting painful experiments on dogs and cats. So not only would it prevent funding for those experiments, but it says if you're a college and university and you have any dog or cat in your laboratory that you're subjecting to painful experiments, you're going to lose all your funding. So we're talking about billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer funding that these universities stand to lose if they continue engaging in these experiments or breeding these animals. And then also Congresswoman Nancy Mace has a bipartisan bill called the PAW Act that would cut funding for the animal experiments, the dog and cat experiments that are the most painful categories of dog and cat experiments. And we've been able to make a lot of great progress through spending bills every year, tightening the noose around these programs and slowly choking them out. And we've seen things that started under Trump's first administration. The VA, for example, has eliminated all of its dog and cat testing as a result of legislation that Trump signed into law back in 2018. The USDA is completely out of the dog and cat testing business, but we have the NIH, which is public enemy number one when it comes to animal testing, that is still holding on, has not made any reforms to reduce the use of dogs and cats in experiments, and is still funding the lion's share of that abuse. So really, we do need action from Dr. Bhattacharya to fix that problem. I love the members of Congress we work with, but the truth is that less than 1% of bills that get introduced are going to make it to the president's desk. And we can, in this administration that is so bold and looking to make reforms and looking to make America great for animals, that we can have them, with the stroke of a pen, to your point, signing executive orders or directives from agency heads saying that no more, today this stops.
Who are some of the big lobbyists or lobby firms or groups that are funding members of Congress to block them from supporting initiatives that would cut back on animal testing? Obviously, You have the manufacturers of all the vaccines that donated to members of Congress to support the vaccines and the mask mandates and all of that nonsense that we were subjected to during COVID. Are there entities out there that are specifically lobbying to stop efforts to crack down on animal testing? And if so, who are they, so that the American people can be aware of what these organizations are, or who we should start telling our members of Congress to stop taking money from?
Yeah, so there are a few organizations that are specifically set up to lobby for more animal testing and against any reforms that would reduce animal testing, allow the retirement of animals even. There's a group called, a misleadingly named group called Americans for Medical Progress, which is one of these groups that lobbies for more animal testing and against any reforms. They want to keep dogs and cats in laboratories. There's receipts to prove that. Lots of letters they've sent the Appropriations Committee saying, we hope you don't cut funding for dog and cat testing. The Foundation for Biomedical Research is another one. Also, an organization explicitly dedicated to defending and protecting and continuing animal experimentation. And then you have all types of other organizations that have broader agendas but work on this issue. So in 2018, when Trump's EPA said we're going to phase out all animal testing by 2035 with a major drawdown of 30% by 2025 this year. That was back in 2019. A few months after Biden took office in 2021, they killed that plan. And they killed that plan because environmental groups came to them and said, for environmental justice reasons, we want you to not only kill the Trump plan to phase out animal testing, but we need you to do more of it to protect vulnerable communities. They think that fattening up mice and rats with unhealthy diets, putting them in cages, turning the heat up and pumping wildfire smoke into the cages is actually going to help people and protect quote unquote vulnerable communities in the name of environmental justice. And that's who was lobbying against reforms.
How does that protect anybody?
It doesn't. It only creates jobs. Animal testing, taxpayer-funded animal testing is essentially turned into a jobs program. The NIH has turned into a jobs program for mad scientists who are otherwise unemployable, who couldn't get a job anywhere else. No one else is going to pay them to do this, except if you're forcing taxpayers to do it against their will and they don't have a choice. But we have to pay our taxes, but we don't have to tolerate this type of bureaucracy and these bureaucrats in Washington who are wasting our money to torture pets and experiments. We don't. And under Trump, we're seeing that start to come to an end, which is great. But environmental groups, we have these pro-animal testing lobby groups. We have environmental groups that are lobbying for more animal testing. And then you have colleges, universities, professors' unions, all these people who are raking in the billions of dollars every year for animal testing. You know, one of the things that the Trump administration did so far that pissed off the college and universities almost more than anything is they started to cap the amount of what it's called indirect cost. There's basically a slush fund that comes with every grant. And some universities and colleges are getting 100% on top of the actual research money to just go into an administrative slush fund. So they're making billions off of this. And so if animal testing gets put on the chopping block where we see a dog, they see a dollar sign, they don't want anything to disrupt the flow of money into the college and university. They don't care if it's for animal testing or whatever. So they're the ones also on Capitol Hill lobbying against a lot of these reforms, against any of these reforms to reduce animal testing because they want the money to keep flowing.
There's a lot of arguments that, we need animal testing so that we could see how humans are going to interact with drugs, or how humans are going to, be able to find a cure for cancer or diabetes, or, all these diseases that that they tell us we need animal testing for. What's the real science behind that? Do we need animal testing to develop a cure for cancer? Do we need animal testing to develop a cure for things like diabetes, or to find out the adverse effects, or, the side effects, or any types of consequences of taking pharmaceuticals? Because, a lot of people say that, if we don't have animals to test on, then, well, we're not going to be able to identify the adverse effects or develop cures. But there's also people who argue that the rate at which, or I guess not the rate at which, but I guess the similarities between a human body and an animal body are so vastly different that there really isn't any kind of, scientific justification for these experiments, because the way that a mouse would react to an experiment is completely different than the way a human being would react to it. So what is the real science behind it? And why are they testing on dogs to find out how a human being would react to a drug overdose? Like, what is the similarity between the DNA of a dog and the DNA of a human being?
I think you made the argument just as well as I could. I mean, it's basically fear-mongering bullshit to suggest that we have to poison puppies or torture any other animal to get cures for humans. And actually, if you look at the data from the NIH, from the Defense Department, from these other agencies that fund animal testing, the FDA included, you see that 90, 95%, 99% of drugs in some cases are failing in humans after being safe and effective in animal tests, because they either don't work or they're dangerous in people, because animal tests don't actually tell you what's going to happen in a human being. So that's why there's this big shift to looking at other technology. And of course, this is putting aside all the stupid animal experiments that have no purpose at all, like putting fish, shrimp, and other animals on treadmills, and other nonsense that the government's doing. But in the case of, drug discovery and stuff, we work with pharmaceutical companies who are constantly lamenting the fact that the federal government, the FDA in particular, or the EPA, is forcing them to experiment on dogs and other animals when it's actually not providing them any useful data about what a drug is going to do in humans. And there was a clip from the other day of RFK at a cabinet meeting where he was talking about the new FDA initiative to reduce and eliminate animal testing. And he talked about how they have found, when they looked at the data, that things like AI and other modern technologies are actually more accurate at predicting what's going to happen in humans, technologies based on human biology, because, mice and rats aren't furry little humans. We evolved, tens of millions of years ago, and you can't even translate for what happens in a mouse to a rat and vice versa. So to suggest that that's going to tell us anything about humans is just completely ridiculous. The reason it continues is bureaucracy, institutional inertia, and because it's big business and a lot of people are getting rich doing it, just like so many other problems we have in this country.
So what happens to these animals either once they're done being experimented on, or once they're rescued from a lot of these labs? When these labs get shut down, or when they don't find a use for the animals anymore, what's going to happen to these 300 beagles a week that are being tested on by the CCP after they're shipped from breeder locations here in the United States of America to labs in China? Are there animal organizations out there that are rescuing dogs and cats and primates from these laboratories? And if so, how do people watching help these animals? Are they up for adoption? Where do these poor animals go once they're done being abused, if they survive?
Right. So best case scenario, when we start to defund and shut down these laboratories, that the animals are healthy enough to come out alive. And then there's the challenge of finding somewhere for them to go. And fortunately, we've been able to enact policies under the first Trump administration at 4 different federal agencies to allow the retirement of lab animals. And they have some kind of the infrastructure to do that and to partner with organizations. One of the great groups we work with that has rescued thousands of beagles from Fauci's dog supplier one of them that was shut down a few years ago, an organization called the Kindness Ranch in Wyoming, takes in dozens
what
of
is it
beagles.
called?
It's called the Kindness Ranch Animal Sanctuary. It's based in Wyoming, nonprofit, and they are explicitly and strictly dedicated to rescuing animals from laboratories. And they work with labs all across the country and around the world. They rescue animals from China. They've gotten animals from labs and meat markets in China, just like you. And they bring these dogs to they have a massive ranch in Wyoming. The dogs and cats live with the employees in houses all over this property to get rehabilitated, socialized, because these dogs they've known tiny barren metal cages with wire floors and fear their whole lives. And anytime anyone comes in a room, it's going to be to hurt them. And coming out of a laboratory, they've never seen the light of day. They've never felt the wind. They've never seen the sun. They've never felt grass underneath their feet. They've never used stairs. They've never touched carpet. And they have to get accustomed not only to trust people, to just be, comfortable with how the world actually is outside of a laboratory. And the Kindness Ranch brings them in, socializes them, gets them comfortable with that, and then finds them loving homes. So we partner with the Kindness Ranch to get animals out of laboratories regularly and get them into loving homes. And we actually just shut down a Fauci-funded cat lab out at University of California, Davis last year. And they shut down their entire breeding operation as a result of closing this experiment that we exposed. 30 cats came out of there. Kindness Ranch rehomed them, and one of them actually lives with our president now, Marigold, a 12-year-old cat.
Oh my
who
God,
spent
that's
her
so nice.
entire
Do they have a
life.
website we could show people live on the show right now? Maybe people can go rescue a dog or
Yeah,
a
go to
cat.
Kindness Ranch. I just talked to them the other day, and they have dozens of dogs and cats from laboratories who have just gotten there in the last couple months and need adoptive homes. So, and we're hoping to bring more and more animals to them as the Trump administration cracks down and shuts down some of these laboratories. Yeah, that's the website for the Kindness
Let's go to
Ranch.
the website. We can look at it right now while you're live on
Yeah,
air.
there you
Let's
go.
see what they have. Oh, maybe I should drive to Wyoming.
We're speaking at their
Maybe I can
gala.
go get maybe I could go
Yeah.
like foster a beagle. That'd be so cool. That's exactly what I need, is a fifth dog.
But these dogs from laboratories, they are so grateful for the kindness and compassion of patient
they have
human
pigs
beings. They make
too.
great horses, pigs, cows. They
Wow.
take bunnies. They take
And
any
these were
animals
all
from
lab
any
animals? These were all animals
Yeah.
that were being tested on in labs? Like every single animal that they have came from a lab?
Yep, different types of experimentation. Some of it's like agriculture production experimentation. Some of it's chemical testing. Some of it's drug testing. Some of it's invasive biomedical experimentation.
Let's go to the drop down. Let's see what they have. Let's see. Adopt. Let's go to their adopt thing. Let's see. Thanks for considering adopting a companion animal. Fill out this form. Do they have a list where you can see the dogs that are available
I don't
for
know if they have
adoption?
I don't know. But I know they've got a long list of adopters. There you go. You could say what type of species
Go back up
you
to
want.
their thing. Let's see what they have. Adoptable friends.
Oh, there you go.
So
Those
if
are
you're
all beagles from
watching and you want a
laboratories.
dog, they're so cute,
There
and
you
they're
go.
all beagles. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Kindness Ranch has vans that they drive around the country and work with laboratories. They pick up these dogs. The president of this organization has a big staff, but he personally goes and picks these dogs up and drives them back to the sanctuary. And then they have a whole team of people who helps rehabilitate them, socialize them, and make sure they're a good fit for whoever the potential adopters are. So again, we've been working to get as many lab animal retirement policies in place inside these federal agencies, and then connecting Kindness Ranch with the relevant folks at these agencies to let them know, listen, when you shut these labs down, here's where the animals can go. And not only do they take the animals, they show up, no questions asked, no cost to taxpayers. So Kindness Ranch completely bears the burden of taking in these animals, rehabilitating them,
How many animals
and
do
whatever
they have at
costs
the
are
ranch?
associated.
Keep on showing the list if you don't mind. I want my producer to keep on scrolling. I want to go through. Keep on scrolling all the
Yeah,
way down.
I don't know how many they have regularly, but it's probably in the hundreds when you count all the little ones and big ones and farmed animals and horses who are living outside.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 of the animals from the Fauci cat lab came to us, 2 white coat staff through the Kindness Ranch. 2 of our employees adopted 2 of those cats.
So cute. And you could foster them too? Or do you have to adopt
I think
them?
so. I think they have a foster program. I'm not sure.
I would totally
but this is the
foster
happy
a
ending we
beagle.
want to get for as many animals as possible. We've been working on legislation that would be government-wide legislation requiring lab animal adoption to be an option in all of these laboratories. Actually, these pro-animal testing groups have opposed that legislation. They don't even want animals coming out alive in many cases. But again, Trump is not beholden to the same types of special interests that previous presidents and agency heads have been, which is what's so refreshing and exciting for us, for taxpayers and animals, is that we have someone who has the interest, track record, and political will to actually shut these laboratories down. and be proud of that. And we saw him do it in the first time around, from 2016 to early 2021, and we're excited he's picking up where he's left off. Again, we're seeing good stuff at FDA, EPA, NIH. DOGE has been cutting transgender grants, some of the grants to China, committing to big sweeping changes at EPA and FDA. But we
Have
need
you
to
been
see
able
some
to
of that
speak
action
to
at the
anybody at the
NIH.
Trump administration about this and these NIH grants and all the funding of the labs? Have you been able to talk to anybody in the second Trump administration about this?
Yeah, we're in touch directly with people at these agencies, letting them know how we can be helpful, working with them, giving them line item lists of projects, both in the, we
This
have
is
lists
so
of dog and
bizarre,
cat
though. I mean,
grants.
if they are aware of this, why are they not shutting it down? I mean, it's just, if the Trump administration's aware of it, why is this not ended yet? It just seems, I just think it's a little bizarre. Don't you think it's a bit bizarre?
I think I don't listen. I don't know. I don't even presume to begin to know what's going on in the White House and the administration right now. I know there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of ways to clean up, but I do know that these are easy wins that a lot of people are going to be happy about. That are saving animals' lives, are cutting waste, are widely supported initiatives, and that the Trump administration, the first family has supported. Don Jr. has been a big fan and supporter of ours, sharing our content about the China dog lab investigation we did. Eric, Laura, the first family has been great. Many people in the administration, from EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, we worked closely with him when he was a member of Congress to end dog testing at the VA, which something Trump led on. So there's a lot of people who are on the right side of this issue. RFK and Marty Makary at the FDA have been supporters of ours and said the right things. I know Marty is a major critic of dog testing and wants to get it cut. And what's great is one of the leading consumers of dogs in this country, dogs in laboratories, is FDA mandated testing. And Dr. Makary is now leading an initiative to cut those mandates. So we really stand to save a lot of money, a lot of animals. And do we want to be a country that's using taxpayers' money against their will to torture pets who most people consider family members? I mean, I think it's really just a stain on humanity, a stain on this country, that in 2025, we are still torturing dogs and cats in experiments that are completely useless and horribly painful and cruel. And I think everyone can agree this is something that should end up on the chopping block sooner rather than later.
Yeah, sooner rather than later, indeed. And so that's my main concern here is why has this not been done yet? So hopefully with this episode, we'll get it all clipped and we'll get it posted, and we can have our own little activist campaign to get Dr. Bhattacharya and the Trump administration to start ending a lot of these grants, because it just seems like a no-brainer. I mean, it's really that easy. We see executive orders get signed from the Oval Office every single day. So perhaps this is the next executive order that needs to be signed, or Dr. Bhattacharya just needs to crack down and tell them no more money. No more money is going to the CCP to torture these innocent dogs. Or maybe you need to get Sean Duffy involved, the transportation secretary. How about we don't allow for any more flights to leave our country that are transporting innocent dogs from laboratories to laboratories abroad in China for the purpose of animal testing? Have you talked to Sean Duffy about this and having the Department of Transportation crack down on the flights that transport these dogs?
No, we haven't, but that's a great idea in terms of crippling making it impossible for some of these experiments to happen.
They shouldn't allow them to transport them. They shouldn't allow them to transport these animals. I mean, how are they allowed to transport? I imagine that they have to have special charters or special planes, because I know when I rescued my dog from China, the cost of the dog, the $1,500 that I paid for my dog, was the cost of the ticket to fly the dog from China to the United States. And they had to actually get a special air carrier to transport hundreds of dogs from China meat markets to the United States of America.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think there's a lot of creative solutions you could have. I mean, we're focused on the money because I guarantee you that if you cut the funding for these programs, most, if not all of them, will never start up again, because no private organization is going to ever fund some of this stuff, like injecting puppies with cocaine or debarking beagles or whatever the case may be. They're just not going to pay for it. There's not a market for it. The government is the market maker when it comes to testing on animals, especially dogs and cats. It's not something anyone wants to see happen. And pharmaceutical companies and chemical companies reluctantly do it because the government forces them to and would love not to. And that's why we need to see some reforms too, in terms of this outdated red tape that's forcing private companies to torture animals unnecessarily, which is incredibly expensive and useless to them. But they do it because bureaucrats in the NIH and FDA and EPA want to see a box checked, because that's what they've always done. And they don't want to, think about solving problems in a new way. So it is frustrating, but I'll tell you, I've been doing this for 20 years. I never thought I would see the day where we would have someone in the White House and heading these agencies that were really actually doing the work, the very hard work of isolating and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse of these, especially when it comes to animal testing. And we're already seeing it happen. Again, first 100 days, a lot's gone on, a lot of good stuff's gone on, a lot more could happen. Maybe in the next 5 days, we'll see the dog and cat experiments get defunded.
We gotta get Trump a beagle. He doesn't have a White House dog. We gotta get Trump a beagle.
We've got lots of rescue beagles in the DC area who would love to come meet him. We've met MTG and Nancy Mace and Paul Gosar and lots of members, brought up these beagle survivors from the laboratories, including from Fauci's labs, so they could put a face to the issue and let them know what we're fighting for here. It's fighting for taxpayers. It's fighting for animals. It's really fighting for the America we want to see. That's not, torturing pets and useless experiments.
I would love to come out. I would love to come to Washington, D.C. and come meet some of these dogs and film some videos to raise awareness.
You just say when and where, I'll be there.
Yeah, we can arrange it. How is your organization funded? Because you're doing fantastic work, and I want to make sure that people know how they can support White Coat Waste, because you're doing incredible work helping save these animals that are being tortured in taxpayer-funded experiments. And I think that people watching, if they can't adopt a dog, then they should support your organization so that you can help rescue and continue exposing a lot of these cruel and unethical animal experiments that are taking place on taxpayer dime. So where do people go to support your work financially?
Yeah, so we're a small nonprofit. We have a staff of about a dozen folks. Like you said, some of us are in DC, but we're all across the country. We don't have galas. We don't have fancy fundraisers. We don't take any money from the government. We didn't take COVID bailout loans like a lot of the big establishment groups did. We walk the walk and talk the talk. We think the government's the problem, and we want them to stay out of our business too. So that means that 80% of our revenue comes from grassroots activists, small dollar donations from people across the country, really across the political spectrum, who just don't want to see their tax dollars wasted on torturing animals and pets in cruel experiments. So if you visit whitecoatwaste.org, you can sign up for our mailing list, you can make a donation, and you can follow us at whitecoatwaste on all the social media platforms to follow our work, see how you can donate or get involved, to contact Congress. I see you've got one of our donation pages up there. Some people give a couple dollars a month. Some people give a one-time donation, but that's really how we survive. We don't have a lot of big donors with deep pockets who are keeping the lights on for us. We really do rely on grassroots activists who can just give a little bit at a time to support the important work we're doing, and we're very grateful for their support. We work with everyone across the political spectrum, from the Freedom Caucus to the Squad. We really do try to unite people around this issue. Now, things have changed in the last few years post-COVID. To your point at the beginning of the show, Republicans are running the show right now when it comes to ending animal testing. Both the House, Senate, and White House, we've never seen the type of progress we've seen. And it is all GOP-led. Some of it's bipartisan, but it is all GOP-led. They're the ones making this a priority, leaning into it. I mean, Donald Trump is literally the first president in history, certainly in a State of the Union address, but maybe in general, whoever talked about ending wasteful animal experimentation.
And they mocked him for it. Bill Barr, who I'm actually suing, he decided to mock this on his program. He was making fun of President Trump and actually said that it wasn't true that they were doing experiments on mice to see if they were transgender. So.
Oh, yeah, there was a massive disinformation campaign launched because they realized this was an Achilles heel for the NIH. NIH's reputation is already in the shitter, and now you find out that they spent $250 million, as I testified to the House Oversight Committee in February, $250 million creating transgender animals and abusing them in experiments. So the left wing came out, big mainstream media came out saying this was fake news. CNN had to issue a correction. Forbes had to issue a correction, and we've seen a lot of articles coming out with the receipts. Gateway Pundit, lots of folks publishing the receipts and showing, oh, it's worse than you even thought. The numbers of animals they were using, tens of thousands of animals in some of these experiments where they're doing transgender surgeries on them, giving them these hormone therapies. So yeah, Trump was on the State of the Union. A couple of days later, brought it up again on Maria Bartiromo's show on Fox. And of course, he famously 5 years ago, we're very grateful and proud that he went on TV and cut the grant to the Wuhan Animal Lab that was probably the greatest biomedical catastrophe in history that was caused by taxpayer-funded animal experiments, approved, greenlit, and covered up by Dr. Fauci. So animal experiments were behind the pandemic. It's an accident waiting to happen if we're going to import that problem here to the U.S. and do that type of gain-of-function research.
I don't think it was an accident.
Yeah, and we'll never, and I don't think we're ever going to know because of the cover-up.
I don't think that was an accident. I don't think things like that happen on accident.
Well, we have these documents that came out that Joni Ernst helped pry from the DoD that came out, I think it was last week, showing that in October 2019, U.S. service members were sick with COVID-like symptoms after going to the military Olympic Games in Wuhan, China, before the pandemic broke out. Mm-hmm. So I've definitely seen commentators suggesting that would be a great way to spread a virus around the world, is where all these militaries come to China in one place and then go back home and bring the virus with them. So unfortunately,
and then they also originally said it came from the wet markets where, they abuse animals. I mean, the wet markets are called wet markets because they have all these animals and a lot of them are alive in these markets, and they call them, from my understanding, wet markets because they literally will kill these animals in boiling hot water at the wet market. So there's water all over the floor. I mean, they have different theories about why they're called wet markets, but from my understanding, they have all these animals and they drown them to death. That's how they drown a lot of the dogs that they sell and they kill for the purposes of eating them. They'll drown them in boiling hot water, or they'll I don't know. You've seen videos online. You can look it up. Just look at the way that they will eat frogs. It's a delicacy, I guess. And they'll have a frog that's alive, and then they pour boiling hot water over it, and then they're cooking it, and they're eating it at the same time while the frog is, boiling to death. And I don't know, for some reason, it sounds crazy with the way I'm describing it, but you can go online and you can see the videos of them and the way that they kill these animals. And they use boiling hot water to torture these animals. And some of the people are eating them, these raw animals, out in the open. And that's originally how they said that this virus spread. They said that it came from, snakes and bats and rats in these wet markets in Wuhan. But
and then
that's
they never
where
found
they torture animals. They torture them there. They drown these animals to death. I mean, there's all types of ways that they're killing these animals, but one of the most common ways that I've heard from people who have been there and people who have witnessed it, or you can watch the videos online, is they drown the animals.
Yeah, I've seen those videos too. And remember, the U.S. government was also paying for that. This USDA laboratory was spending money to fly staff to the wet markets, buy dog and cat meat fresh at the wet markets, fly it back in their carry-on luggage,
and it's fresh, and it really is fresh.
So we were
putting, we were propping they're alive, and they killed the dogs.
So we were paying the Wuhan lab. We were customers at the wet markets unwittingly. U.S. taxpayers were. So this is a recipe for disaster. This is why you don't send tax dollars to an authoritarian country on the other side of the world that's an adversarial nation that wants to destroy the United States. Not only abuses animals in experiments, but you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of reports that they eat the animals they infect and kill in these experiments also, and they end up in the wet markets. So I don't know why we would want to have any part in that. Clearly, with the case of the gain-of-function research.
That's how my dog was rescued. My dog apparently was rescued by an activist. I think they kidnap these dogs that are supposed to be sold, from my understanding. They kidnap these dogs that are supposed to be sold in the meat markets, and they rescue them, and then they find people in America that want to buy them.
Yeah, and they might have been kidnapped in the first place as someone's pet, and then ended up at the wet market. So that's probably the best thing for that.
I don't consider kidnapping because my dog is rescued. Otherwise, my dog would have been Kung Pao Mecca. I call it. Her name is Mecca, so she would have been Kung Pao Mecca, and now she gets to sleep with me every single night. So
So I think.
It's really gross. It's really disgusting. My dog was emaciated when I got my dog. She's 10 pounds. I've had steaks that weigh way more than my dog. I don't even understand how they would eat a little tiny poodle like that. So it's really barbaric, the things that they do. It's really horrific.
Yeah. And insult to injury to all of this is we're actually suing the NIH right now because for labs in China and other foreign countries, the NIH completely exempts them from any oversight that's required of labs in the US. So if you're a foreign laboratory, this is why a lot of the money gets shipped overseas to like places like that Beagle lab in Tunisia that was putting the dogs in the cages with the biting flies or the gain of function experiments on humanized mice and bats in China. That's why a lot of it gets offshored because it wouldn't be allowed here and there's absolutely no oversight of it. Fauci and the NIH have said in 40 years of funding foreign labs, they've never visited a single laboratory once to inspect it. The GAO came out with a report a couple years ago. So we're suing the NIH over this illegal loophole because not only shipping billions, literally billions of dollars to animal laboratories in China and other foreign countries, we have literally no idea how it's being spent, what's happening to the animals, or whether any biosafety precautions are taking place. And that's how you end up with what happened in Wuhan.
Absolutely horrific. Any last comments or any last thoughts that you want to share with the viewers? I know you've been on for an hour. Thanks so much for your time, but I just felt that this was so compelling and it's so disturbing that people needed to see where their taxpayer money was going today on tax day. But is there anything else that you want to close with or inform our viewers about? We have about 40,000 people watching live right now on X. So hopefully a lot of these people will contact Dr. Bhattacharya and some of these Trump administration officials to get some of this grant money canceled.
Yeah, I would just say that, again, the U.S. government is public enemy number one when it comes to animal testing. In your social media feed, you may see things about product testing, cosmetics testing. That's essentially not a problem anymore. It's almost all done. The biggest problem now is government-funded testing and government-mandated testing on animals, both in the United States and abroad. So if you want to fix that problem, if you want to save puppies and kittens and monkeys and bunnies and other animals from being tortured in government laboratories, follow Whitecoat at Whitecoat Waste on those social media platforms and visit our website, whitecoatwaste.org. Sign up for our mailing list. We obviously would appreciate any generous donation you can give, but even if you can't or don't choose to, we'd love for you to join the fight. Write to Congress, write to the president.
It's a nonprofit, so it's tax deductible, right, when people donate to you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. And again, almost entirely supported by grassroots activists, grassroots donations. And we're not spending, we don't have big ticket galas and things like that. The money is going right into the programs to pay my salary, pay other people's salary on the staff, to do research, and to run these campaigns to, what we say FED, find, expose, and defund wasteful government animal experiments.
Well, it's very honorable work that you're doing, saving our furry friends from all of these evil mad scientists who are trying to harm and abuse animals. So, Justin, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can create a firestorm that will reach the desk of President Donald Trump.
Let's do it.
Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Laura.
This is very disturbing. I've been in talks with Justin for the last few weeks now, trying to get him on the show. And, you know, I was out last week. I had to travel to California for my deposition of Bill Maher. And then the week before that, of course, I was at the Oval Office meeting with President Trump. I mean, everybody saw that news story. But this is really disturbing. And I think that people need to know about this, especially today of all days, tax day, when their tax money is going towards paying and funding for these, you know, horrific animal experiments. It really honestly disturbs me to my core. Let's see what people are saying in the chat. Be sure that you repost this live link and post your comments and all of your questions in the chat. But before I take your questions and comments in the chat tonight, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed. And that, of course, is Kirk Elliott Precious Metals.
Breaking news. Laura Loomer has been canceled. The President of the United States has refused to take her phone calls as he suspects she is soon to be arrested.
Is Laura Loomer the most hated person on planet Earth? We want to hear from you, the listener, and get your opinion on whether or not...
Man, I tell you, I heard she got canceled. We coming for you, bitch. We coming to your house, Laura Loomer. We know where you live. We coming for you right now. We coming for your friends. We coming for your friend's little dog.
Frankly, I hope they throw her away for the rest of her life. I hope she dies.
She is currently on the run from authorities. She is described as armed and dangerous.
I just can't believe she's been getting away with it for this. An angry mob appears to be forming outside the home of journalist Laura Loomer.
What is wrong with you? Why are you not panicking?
Because I called Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, and I learned how adding gold and silver to my portfolio is one of the safest ways to not just grow my finances, but to also protect them from the uncertainty of the future. So I'm fine.
Call economist Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900 or schedule a call online at kepm.com/Loomer to learn how you can safely grow your retirement portfolio with precious metals.
Thank you to Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. Be sure that you visit kepm.com/Loomer. Again, that's kepm.com/Loomer, or you can call 720-605-3900. Again, that's 720-605-3900, or you can visit the website here, kepm.com/Loomer. Again, kepm.com/Loomer. Go ahead and put your comments and your questions in the chat. I want to hear what you have to say about these horrific animal experiments. Laura, thank you for being such a strong voice for the cats and dogs. Animal cruelty and abuse must stop. Savannah said disturbing, but extremely informative. Thank you, Laura. It's so awful, isn't it? We definitely need to contact Dr. Bhattacharya. We need to contact Dr. Bhattacharya and the Trump administration and let them know that these grants need to end. And again, I'm not trying to attack anybody, but it's just kind of bullshit at the end of the day. If you're the director of the NIH and you oppose animal testing, then use your power as the director of the NIH and crack down on animal testing. It's that simple. I don't really understand how this has to be complicated. If you're the director of the NIH, sign a directive banning all future funds going towards animal testing. Cancel all of the grants going to the CCP for their beagle tests. It's that simple. We're definitely going to be following this in the coming days and also the coming weeks, demanding accountability at the NIH. Moving on, though. President Trump recently met with Nayib Bukele, the fantastic president of El Salvador, at the White House. We have some clips, actually. President Bukele, he's somebody that I admire. I went to El Salvador in 2021. That's where I was during January 6th. A lot of people are like, oh, were you at the Capitol on J6? No, I was out of the country. I was actually in El Salvador during January 6th. And, he's a transformative leader. He really has done so much to transform El Salvador from a third world country, one of the most dangerous countries in the world, the country with the highest homicide rate, to now becoming a leader in cracking down on illegal immigration, Bitcoin innovation, technological innovation, the first country in the world to accept Bitcoin as legal tender, really doing fantastic work, and also working with the Trump administration to allow for the deportation of violent criminal illegal aliens in MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. So let's go ahead and play some of these clips of President Trump welcoming President Bukele to the White House for his meeting this week.
Ready closed. Ready shut. Ready face. Forward march. President Trump, your message to Christians during this Holy Week, sir. You have a message for Christians, sir, during this Holy Week.
We have some other videos too. Bukele telling President Trump that he has 350 million people to liberate. Let's go ahead and play this clip.
And we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it. And we actually turn the murder capital of the world, that was the journalists call it, right? Murder capital of the world, into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, if sometimes they say that we imprisoned thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like...
That's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
Yes. And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate. Yeah. But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. You know, that's the way it works, right? You cannot just, you know, free the criminals and think crime's going to go down magically. You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime and the end of terrorism. And it can be done. I mean, you're doing it already. And I'm sure that people have seen the change in the streets. A long way to go because you're just initiating your second term. But it's clear that, you know, with the numbers at the border, you know, even in Democrat-run cities, they get a help from the work you're doing. So I'm really happy to be here, honored, and eager to help.
Now, of course, the left-wing media is up in arms over the fact that El Salvador is allowing for the Trump administration to send violent criminal illegal aliens to El Salvador to be housed in their top-notch facility called CCOT. So I guess Caitlin Collins of CNN, who is outraged over the deportation of criminal illegal aliens, had something to say about this during this press conference between President Trump and Nayib Bukele. So let's go ahead and play this clip of President Trump and different members of his administration taking turns ripping Caitlin Collins for her ignorance during the meeting between President Trump and El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele.
Return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for anything to get him back?
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor.
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
Can
President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm also going to suggest that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? And that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into.
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah,
they're sick. These are sick people. Mark, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
It's incredible, isn't it, how far the leftist media will go to advocate for criminals and terrorists and, criminal illegal aliens who, as they said, are raping young girls and committing crimes and, attacking police officers, trafficking drugs into our country. And yet you never see these people advocate for the American people. Yet now we have Cory Booker. I think we have a clip of Cory Booker talking about how he wants to organize a delegation of Democrat senators to go to El Salvador to advocate for the release of this individual. But none of these Democrats want to go to Gaza to have conversations with Hamas to advocate for the release of American hostages, right? I mean, the hypocrisy is astounding. Do we have this clip of Cory Booker today? It is just so unbelievable. I know I tweeted about it earlier, but you have to ask yourself, why are they in such outrage over a criminal illegal alien in El Salvador? Why do they want to bring this person back to the United States so badly? Does anyone ever study the psychology of a Democrat member of Congress and ask them why they find the need to come to the defense of criminal illegal aliens and people who are not supposed to be in our country? Gangbangers, people who associate with the lowest, the people with the lowest level of morality in our society, just gutter trash individuals. There should be a psychological study conducted on Democrats and why they find a need to constantly defend the worst of the worst in our society. It is truly disturbing that this is where they want to focus their energies. This is the hill that they want to die on. While President Trump is focused on making America safe again and trying to bring hostages home, they want to bring criminals home, and they want to promote open borders and block President Trump from deporting criminal illegal aliens in Tren de Aragua and MS-13. Let's go ahead and play the clip.
Do you think the Trump administration is defying a court order?
It certainly appears that they are, and they're trying to play too cute with parsing words. The court has ordered the return of this person and that the Trump administration should do it. They're paying an authoritarian leader in El Salvador to hold people in the worst imaginable types of prisons that he has sent there without any due process. And this isn't just about Mr. Garcia. This is about every American understanding that this president is making an assault on the due process rights that are afforded to people in our country. Everybody from Anton Scalia to other conservative think tanks have said very clearly, you cannot disappear people off American streets. We are a nation of rules, and due process is clearly one of them. And to erode the due process rights of anyone is a threat to the due process rights of everyone. This is a democratic slippage, and we all should be speaking out against it.
Unbelievable. What we need to be speaking out against as a country is the Democrat Party facilitating and harboring illegal immigration and protecting violent gangbangers. That's what we need to be focused on. I want to take a moment to thank the second sponsor of tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed, and that, of course, is Wildflower Coffee Company. If you're sick and tired of toxic corporate coffee that is loaded with chemicals, then you're going to enjoy Wildflower Coffee. Wildflower Coffee Company is a family-run business committed to quality and integrity that offers clean, organic, roasted-to-order coffee with zero mold, zero mycotoxins, and no junk. Their new Mind Glow Mushroom Latte is a game changer with 6 functional mushrooms, cacao, ashwagandha, and 0 fillers. It helps you boost focus, cuts brain fog, and it actually supports your health. They also sell top-tier brewing gear and classic coffee for real caffeine lovers like me, so you never have to slow down. Shop now at www.wildflowercoffeecompany.com and use code Loomer at checkout, and you can save 20% off on your first order. You can check out their website here. Again, that's wildflowercoffeecompany.com, wildflowercoffeecompany.com/Loomer, wildflowercoffeecompany.com/Loomer, and save up to 20% off. Again, they have coffee products, they have lattes, they have mushroom powders, and they have coffee brewing machines as well. You can check out the coffee brewing machines that they have. Lots of really nice gear. Makes great gifts. It comes in beautiful packaging. They sent me some samples to try. I really like their mushroom blends. Drip scales, espresso machines, state-of-the-art equipment, kettles. And when you use code Loomer at checkout, as I said before, you will get 20% off your order at Wildflower Coffee Company. Check it out. I highly recommend it. Alrighty. Any other comments, you guys? Any other questions? Somebody said everybody sells coffee. I can only drink so much. Well, you drink coffee every day if you're like me. So next time you buy coffee, you can buy it from Wildflower Coffee Co. Or if you need to upgrade your machine, like your espresso machine or your coffee machine or your kettle, they have really nice espresso machines. Let's see. Any other comments, you guys? Any other questions? Again, we are live right now on X and Rumble, so please be sure that you're following me on X at Laura Loomer or on X at Loomer Unleashed. Be sure that you repost the live link. Happy Passover to all of my Jewish followers and all my Jewish viewers. Easter's coming up this weekend. President Trump is expected to have what he's calling, it's going to be like a blockbuster Holy Weekend here at the White House. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited to see what he has planned. We saw the desecration of Holy Week under the Biden administration. So see what's going to happen. And again, you guys, please be sure that you check out Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, the sponsor of tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed. I have that commercial that I filmed with them pinned at the top of my X profile. We can go ahead and watch it again. But Kirk Elliott Precious Metals is doing a lot to support free speech. And also, if you haven't noticed this week, gold is surging. Record high prices for gold. So be sure that you're investing in precious metals, you guys. Call Kirk Elliott today. Record high historic levels of gold today, you guys. So check it out. Call Kirk Elliott today. Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, KEPM.com/Loomer. Dr. Kirk is actually going to be on my show on Thursday to talk about the Trump tariffs and talk about the surge of gold. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and play this commercial that I'm featured in from Kirk Elliott Precious Metals.
Breaking news. Laura Loomer has been canceled. The President of the United States has refused to take her phone calls as he suspects she is soon to be arrested.
Is Laura Loomer the most hated person on planet Earth? We want to hear from you, the listener, and get your opinion on whether or not...
Man, I tell you, I heard she got canceled. We coming for you, bitch. We coming to your house, Laura Loomer. We know where you live. We coming for you right now. We coming for your friends. We coming for your friend's little dog.
Frankly, I hope they throw her away for the rest of her life. I hope she dies.
She is currently on the run from authorities. She is described as armed and dangerous.
I just can't believe she's been getting away with it for this. An angry mob appears to be forming outside the home of journalist Laura Loomer.
What is wrong with you? Why are you not panicking?
Because I called Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, and I learned how adding gold and silver to my portfolio is one of the safest ways to not just grow my finances, but to also protect them from the uncertainty of the future. So I'm fine.
Call economist Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900 or schedule a call online at kepm.com/Loomer to learn how you can safely grow your retirement portfolio with precious metals.
Again, that website is kepm.com/Loomer, kepm.com/Loomer. We broke a lot of stories today on Loomer.com in addition to this story that relates to white coat waste. So be sure that you check out Loomer.com. We have a story that we released tonight about the Florida Freedom Fund and how it's being used as a potential slush fund for Casey DeSantis's likely gubernatorial run here in the state of Florida. So as you know, President Trump has already endorsed Byron Donalds to run for governor of Florida. But, well, we've seen that the DeSantis's Jill, that's her real name, Jill Casey DeSantis. So Jill Casey and Ron DeSantis, her husband, are so incapable of having any kind of grace or humility after running a failed presidential campaign against President Trump. So now I guess they want to embarrass themselves again for round two. So stay tuned, because it's highly likely that after the Florida legislative session ends in these next few weeks, it should be over at the end of May, that we're going to see Casey DeSantis file to run for governor of Florida. And hey, I've been telling you all for years. I was really one of the first people to blow the whistle on this 2 years ago. And people said I was crazy, but you're going to find out. You're going to see real soon that Casey DeSantis is going to be running for governor. Any more comments? Let's go to the chat. Somebody said that I'm probably going to get a fifth dog. I know. I'm probably going to go out and see those beagles, and then I'm going to say, oh my God, I need a fifth dog. That's why I need to just get a bigger place. Need to get a bigger place and a bigger bed, because every night my dogs sleep with me. Last night I came back and my dogs were all in the bed with me. There was no room. All the dogs on the bed, and the bulldog was competing with the Yorkie poo. Who's going to cuddle with mom more, sitting right on my face? I need a bigger place and a bigger bed, and then I can get all the dogs in the world. One of the comments said, Kirk Elliott, excellent service, knowledgeable. Very good. Really glad that you guys are enjoying Kirk Elliott. We hear nothing but positive reviews from the viewers of Loomer Unleashed, who reach out to Dr. Kirk Elliott and his team at Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. But hey, if you want a dog, check out that ranch, the Kindness Ranch. Definitely consider adopting a beagle that was rescued from one of Fauci's labs. Horrible. Really terrible what they're doing to these dogs. Anyway, with that, Loomer Unleashed is going to resume this Thursday. Again, we're going to have Dr. Kirk Elliott on, talking about the Trump tariffs and talking about why you should be investing in gold and silver. And we're going to have a lot more stories to cover because, well, it's never a dull moment in the golden age of President Trump's second administration. There's a lot of news coming out this week. And you can follow along on my X account at Laura Loomer or on Loomer Unleashed. Congress is on a recess, so we're not going to have any videos this week confronting and loomering members of Congress because, well, when do these people really ever work? They've decided that they want to go take another 2-week-long vacation. So Congress is out of session for the next 2 weeks. But in the meantime, we'll be breaking a lot of stories on my website, loomer.com, and you can follow along for all of the exclusive updates and reports. Be sure that you're following me on Rumble, rumble.com/Laura Loomer. And again, follow me on X at Laura Loomer and on X at Loomer Unleashed. With that, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to call Dr. Bhattacharya at NIH and tell him to end all of the animal testing contracts and all of the grants for these Beagle labs and these Beagle experiments at CCP funded and US taxpayer funded labs in China. We have to shut this down. Totally unacceptable today that on tax day, our money, $20 billion, can you believe it? $20 billion is going to go towards funding animal testing this year. Unacceptable. We can't allow it to happen under the Trump administration. Needs to be shut down. I'm going to be posting links tonight and tomorrow about who you can contact at the NIH so that we can try to end these animal tests once and for all. But with that, I will see you on Thursday for another episode of Loomer Unleashed. Thanks so much for tuning in and have a great night.
There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems will be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself to
She
Twitter.
chained herself.